Well, let's talk and discuss this with me in the studio. Ben Southwood, Head of Research at the UK-based think tank, the Adam Smith Institute. And joining us from our Oxford studio, Danny Dorling, Halford Mackinder Professor of Geography at the University of Oxford and author of Inequality and the 1%. Professor Dorling, if I can start with you. I mean, does this really matter? Because there is the argument, of course, that the richest 1% raise the tide for everybody else.
There is that argument. These are the same statistics that are produced by the bank Credit Suisse, so they're very sound statistics. Last year, Credit Suisse showed that it got up to 48% of the world wealth owned by 1%. This year it looks like 49%, and Oxfam are highlighting that next year this is going up to 50%. And the problem is that as the richest 1% of people in the world take a greater and greater share of world wealth, for everybody else there is less, and so issues such as minimum incomes, minimum wages, public services become not discussed. Oxfam have 7 issues that they say need to be discussed because the best off 1% are taking so very much. But when people say that this isn't a problem, those issues do not get discussed.
But what about the contribution, for example, to charities, to the eradication of disease, to philanthropic organisations?
This is an old argument. The last time we were this unequal in the world was around about the time of the First World War, and the very rich back then said that they were contributing to the eradication of disease, building hospitals, making libraries, but of course it didn't really help that much. What you really need to eradicate disease are health services, and you have to fund those from taxation and arrange them within your own country. You can't expect a billionaire to fund your health service in West Africa.
But is that true? I mean, one thinks of something like Bill Gates, for example, and his plans, and fine, yes, I mean, his businesses...
Bill Gates is brilliant at vaccinating babies.
Favourable tax locations, but isn't there that philanthropic drive?
We've always had some philanthropy, but it hasn't been the thing which has raised our overall standard of living. That has been when we've organised ourselves better, which we did all the way from the First World War through to the 1970s. It's only been since the 1980s that the 1% have started taking more and more and more of the cake, and a whole series of social institutions around the world have begun to break down.
All right, Ben Southwood, what do you think?
Well, I think the key thing we have to look at here is, I think most of the things Danny's talking about are within country inequality. So within country inequality is very clear that's going up on lots of different measures. But between country inequality, global inequality, it's not so clear that's going up. These numbers are net wealth figures. They imply that people like Michael Jackson before he died, or an investment banker with lots of student debt, but he hasn't had his whole career yet and built up lots of wealth, they imply they're the poorest people in the world because they have negative wealth. Yeah. It implies that people, rural Indian farmers, for example, aren't quite the poorest people of the year. If you look, in the world, sorry. So if you look at their bottom 10%, the world bottom decile, 7.5% of those people are from the USA. That's about the same number that are coming from India in their numbers. I don't think these net wealth figures are the best way of looking at things. I think we should look at stuff like how many people are earning $2 or less a day, how many people are earning $1 or less a day, or the global Gini coefficient for income. And all of those show falling global poverty and falling global inequality. So I think there's a legitimate problem within country inequality. If you think that's a bad thing, which Danny does, and he gives some good arguments why we might think that, but I don't think we should be so quick to say that global inequality is rising.
Let's just put that to Professor Dorling and Danny Dorling about the methodology. I mean, how do you answer that?
Well, the methodology is the same methodology that's used by Credit Suisse. It is true that Michael Jackson can suddenly look very poor if he becomes bankrupt, but pop stars as a whole look rich. Investment bankers as a whole look rich, but of course they look poor when they've just graduated and they have a lot of student debt. Your other guest is right. There's a complicated picture internationally. Within countries, inequality has been rising dramatically, and this is a huge problem. Internationally, there's been some coming together. It's at the extremes. It's only at the extremes of the 1% and the very poorest that you see this pulling apart. In the middle of the global income distribution, we are seeing some remarkable things happen, mainly because of China, and coming together, if you like, the global middle class. But of course, the global middle class look poor as far as people in the rich world are concerned.
All right, so that's his argument. Credit Suisse did the figures.
That's a very good point, actually. Yeah. No, so I don't doubt all the numbers that have actually gone into it. They're completely valid. I just don't think it tells a very important story. But the last thing Danny said is a very good point. So in the UK, the global 1%, you don't realise how many people that includes. To be in the global 1%, you need wealth of about £500,000. So if you own a house worth £500,000, you're in the 1%. That's about 5 million, probably, people in the UK fall into that. I don't know the exact number, but it'd be about that number. So you need to remember that when we're talking about the global 1%, that's a lot of people watching this show. That's not.
Yes, it's probably you, is it?
Not me. Sadly, I don't own a house.
Yes.
But
it's probably Danny Dorling.
yeah, perhaps. That's not me trying to have a go at him.
Are you in the 1%, Danny Dorling?
I'm like one of your investment bankers. I have a huge mortgage, but by the time I'm 70 or 80, for a brief time, I will be in the 1% and then I'll be dead.
All right. Just a final thought there, Ben. But is it a problem having global inequality philosophically?
I don't know about philosophically. I think that if global inequality led to slower growth and worse outcomes for the badly off in the long run, then it would be a bad thing. I'm not sure the evidence is there for that. One of the main reasons people think that inequality reduces growth is that you have to implement taxes at the high end to get rid of the inequality. Of course, those taxes are as the direct effect of what's reducing growth in lots of models. I mean, there's some other models that say differently, but...
OK, and just a final thought from you, Danny Dorling. When you look at the lobbying taking place by this 1%, it is interesting, isn't it, in the United States, for example, that most of the lobbying seems to be about tax breaks and personal and corporate taxation.
Oh, yeah. The 1% spend more money lobbying politicians than the rest of the public put together. So the 1% are very, very powerful politically. And the worry for Oxfam is the incredible increase in their wealth so rapidly, which means that there's a huge increase in their political power and the amount of lobbying the 1% will be able to do in the years to come.
All right. Danny Dorling, Ben Southwood, fascinating. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on